Beautiful. Thank you. So we enter into a new month and a new theme and a new possibility. And I've been, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I've been hanging out with God a little bit of late and trying to figure out what is it I need to know. And sort of the message I get over and over is you make it too difficult. Right? So maybe we'll just go back to simple again, right? Because, you know, one of the things I do over and over and over is speak to this idea that we already live and move and have our being in the divine presence. And yet, sometimes I find myself operating as if I don't. Not trusting that. Not being aware of who I am, the nature of the divine. And so, in this month, we're speaking to this idea of a realization of the divine. In my understanding, as I moved from a idea of a God outside of myself that I was trying to connect with or manipulate, as the case may be, to a recognition of one life and one power and one presence that is always available, that is expressing through me and through all creation, then I realized that what I needed to do was to begin a practice and a process to help me do that. And so I found these wonderful teachings that help us to understand or help us to work with the tool that we have been given. And the tool that we have been given is our mind. So I love this idea that Guy Finley puts forth of the amazing discovery is that the thing that we're looking for is within us. Jesus spoke to it in saying that the kingdom of heaven, this spiritual dimension, is within us. All of the master teachers, I believe, were trying to help us to understand that this spiritual dimension is already ours. And so we go in search and we go in seeking for this thing, and it seems like sort of the last place we think to look would be within ourselves. As I've been looking at this, so Guy Finley puts forth this idea, the secrets of the higher spiritual success. I don't know how you judge these things, but one of the things I notice, now when I came into New Thought, it was kind of in the late 80s, and it was all about manifesting, you know. And so sort of the criteria was driving BMWs and, you know, wearing kind of the outer expression of your success. I don't know if any of you remember that era, but, right, it was kind of like demonstrate, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the thing that I know is that without the understanding that underlies it, that's an empty thing. So we all come to this phase, we've talked about it many times, but we come to this phase where for many of us, we left a tradition that placed God outside of ourselves, and we are trying to get God to intercede or to create what we wanted or all of that stuff, right? And then somehow we found ourselves here or someplace like here, and that began to teach us this idea that we can visualize what we want. And if we visualize what we want and we can gain belief in that, we can create that. We can manifest that. And so we go about into the manifestation phase. That's a beautiful thing. It's a necessary thing. It's an important thing. But it's not the only thing. Having established that as our basis, then the next evolution is what I would refer to as surrender, although for many people when you say surrender, they hear that as giving up, as opposed to opening up. When we start to realize that there's a divine wisdom at work in our world that knows the most, that knows all, and that is expressing through and as all of creation. And so we're reminded that within the acorn, the mighty oak tree exists. It already exists. Now, it has a process of unfoldment, doesn't it? But it already exists. So we're realizing we're working to become present to this greater spiritual authority, to this greater wisdom, this greater insight that is within us. So it's all good and fine to demonstrate and to manifest and to create the outer picture, but until we have that real shift within us that realizes that, as Jesus said to us, the kingdom's not here or there, it's right here. That in this very moment, in these very circumstances, all that God is for my recognition and realization of it. When I began to learn about spiritual prayer, affirmative prayer, it was taught a simple process, and the first step was to recognize that there's only one life. There's only one power. There's only one presence. So what happens if that's true? It means everything's part of the one. Now, I sometimes have this, I have this image it's all one except for my little bubble that's outside of the one, right? That's where I go when I believe in separation. But when I come back to there's one life, one power, one presence, then guess what I am? Guess who I am? I am that life. That life animates my very being. And that, my friends, is what gives us the power. You see, the ego would think, hey, look at me demonstrating all big and fancy, right? And if we're not careful of that, the ego takes over and goes, wow. But you see, if the ego can create, it can discreate as well. So it's not the ego, it's not this thing that gives us the power other than the realization of our oneness that then allows us to speak a word of truth from that higher spiritual dimension, from that realization of who we are. The great poet and sage Ralph Waldo Emerson awakened one day to his timeless true nature. He spent the rest of his days explaining and describing it. I'm going to read this because the print's getting smaller. My crazy printer of mine's getting fuzzier and fuzzier as it goes along. At the risk of just reinterpreting Emerson's words, I'll actually read them to you. His writings hint of a heaven meant for all. You know this phrase. There is one mind common to all individual people. I'm going to be generic. All people are an inlet to the same and to all of the same. He that is once admitted to the right of reason is made a free person to the whole estate. What Plato has taught, we may think. What a saint has felt, we may feel. What at any time has befallen a person, we can understand. Who has access to this universal mind is a party to all that is and that can be, and for this is the only and sovereign agent. You see, Emerson and the Transcendentalists started to put forward this idea a couple hundred years ago of that we are not separate, that there is one mind common to all, and those that learn to access and utilize become free. We tap into that same wisdom of Plato. We tap into the same experience. It already exists. The reason I believe that we have separated is not that we've ever actually separated at all, because even if you feel separated from God, you keep breathing. I don't believe in God. Okay? You're still breathing. Your heart's still pumping. Something's going on. Call it what you want. I don't care. You call it, call it Sam if it works for you. But that it's still at work, right? Life is still working. But if I believe in the separation from the one, then my life starts to be about overcoming. I start to see things in my life as obstacles. I see things as blockages to my greater good. And carried to the extreme, when we get to a place of war, we see others as the ones who are prohibiting or diminishing our good, and so we take them out because that solves everything. or not. Hadn't worked so far, but, maybe we'll try it yet one more time. Rather, to realize that if it is true, if what Jesus was telling us, what Emerson is telling us, is that right where we are is the presence of the divine, then my adjustment is about being still, to stop listening to the chatter mind and tap the higher mind, we might call it. You know those minds, right? Yeah. You see, I often speak of it in terms of, when I think about it in terms of meditation, that when there's the reactive mind that we have, that is always judging, always processing, always naming, always claiming, right? So everything's happening, we're saying, oh, that's bad, that's good, oh, right? That's our reactive mind. But behind that mind, there is a observer mind. And I know that because I observe myself with my monkey mind, right? So when we can, it's very simple. If we'll just stop, take a breath, all of a sudden, like, wow, I feel peaceful. So there it is. There's a secret. Take a breath. Stop. Now, the trick is to do that all the time. You see, it's a funny thing. We talk about how we get into this reactive mind, and so much of what's happening in our lives is because we're operating from that. He uses an example in a wonderful book. He's like, if you can learn to just observe, not judge, but to observe, you can see this take place in our world. Let's say you're having dinner with a group of friends, and they're sitting around the table. Everything's cool. Everybody's at peace. Everything's wonderful. And then somebody says, have you heard about what's happening with the price of coffee? Now, that's a neutral thing, isn't it? And then somebody says, what's happening? And somebody says, the price is going up. Let's use gas. That's going on right now. Right? The price of gas. Now, what happens? People that don't drink coffee or use gas are like, whatever. I'm not going to react to that. But if you're addicted, then a fear thought comes in and says, oh my God, what if I can't afford my morning cup of coffee? Then what happens to my life? And we're off and running down the road. Now, if you can gather some people around you who are also addicted and want to be in that train, then you can create a little group around, oh my God, have you heard about what, right? Let us protest, right? See where we go? It was a neutral thing until we add to it an interpretation and a reaction. Guy Finley, as he's talking about this idea, is he's saying that what we need to, whatever we call it, what we need to do is to learn to be in that free mind that observes without reacting. Because it's all pretty neutral, isn't it? If you've ever been to any event, maybe you've been to the same movie with your beloved who you agree 100% about everything with, as all spouses do, and you walk out of the movie and you realize you just had two entirely different experiences of the same movie. Isn't that amazing how that works? Now, one option is to start trying to convince your beloved, who you agree with everything about why you're right about your experience. And that always works. Or you just realize that we are all in this process of interpretation, but we can come back to a place of peace. We can come back to a place of peace. And the spiritual practice is not that we do meditation every day, although highly encourage it. But it's the 3.5 hours in between that half hour of meditation is where the practice lies. When I take the breath, when I find myself reacting. There's a lot to react about right now. And part of what is happening in our media is they figured that out because they say, have you heard about how we're all going to die? We'll follow up on that right after the commercial break. And you're like, well, I need to find out how we're all going to die. That would be a good piece of information. So I'll sit here and watch this inane thing so that I can find out the news, right? Don't blame them. They just work in a process. But if we're not careful of our own mind, then we can move into that and go, oh my goodness, have you heard what happened? Ain't it awful? So throughout recorded history, there's those who have been who have sought and found that celestial origin. We might call it the mind of Christ. We might call it the Buddhic presence. We might call it 10,000 other names, and it doesn't matter what we call it. That's why I love being in a I don't even like to call this a religion, but in a philosophy, a spiritual philosophy that allows us to have a set of principles, but then to also share in the wisdom of other traditions. Because when you get beyond the outer, all the ways we differ, you see a very consistent inner message. Over and over you see, whether it's Hinduism or whether it's Buddhism or whether it's Christianity, that at the heart there is a teaching of compassion, of kindness, of mindfulness, of presence. And when we start there, when we seek first this, then the other things are added to us. When we seek the outer first, then we can chase and chase and chase. Right? So I was looking at some of these materials. I was reminded of this idea sometimes about what drives greed. Right? Why is it if you have $1 billion, you feel like you need to have 2? Right? Or if you've got your 2 already, you're looking at the 4. I don't know where you fall in the scheme of things, but right? But that thing that says, this isn't enough. So I must go get more. But when we do that, so again, not judging anybody, I'm just saying it's how this reactive mind plays out. That says, where I am today is not enough. Who I am today is not enough. What I'm experiencing today is not enough. And because we have bought into the misleading idea that more is more, we go and consume, and we think, surely this new outfit will make me look beautiful. Right? And sometimes we find that we have closets full of stuff. Right? Because the thing did not provide the experience. When we recognize we are beautiful, with all of our wonderfulness, then it doesn't really matter what you put on because you're going to rock it. That's how I feel, right? Just going to rock it because I am beautiful. I am at peace. I am love. The teachings is the recognition that we are not separate from our good. We say this 100 times, 100 different ways, week after week. And yet, I don't know about you, but I sometimes think that I'm separate from my good. But when I realize that it's in this presence and in this power that I dwell, that my power comes not from the outer, but from that inner recognition. You see, part of what allows an oak tree to become fully manifest from the acorn is it doesn't have a limiting ego that says, oh, I don't know. You really want to be that big? You want to be that mighty? I mean, you know, the neighbors. What will they think, right? Don't be prideful, right? But to recognize that there is within us this presence and this power, and that we can not only access it, but we can allow it. I've been saying this a lot lately, but it just keeps coming back to me, that we then move from that stage of wanting to make things happen, wanting to manifest things, wanting to control things, to simply make things welcome. That if I am the presence of peace, then I attract to me peaceful experiences. And my peace is not determined by what is going on around me. That's how you know a spiritually aware person. that what's going on in the world doesn't throw us off our game. And so we stop and we take a breath and we reconnect with the moment. And we realize the same intelligence that caused that breath to happen is the same that is guiding our life, that we can trust, that we can allow. Guy Finley says, the need for whatever I may be that we're drawn to is yet to be a realized presence within us. And it is the very thing to which I am drawn. So if we are drawn to a thing, it's because the presence within us is drawing us to it. Isn't that amazing? It's not because we don't have it. It's because we are being drawn to the thing to be made realized in our world. And so we are living, breathing embodiments of divine life. Rumi said to us that if you wish for light, be ready to receive light. Nourish your ego and be deprived of light. If you want to find a way out of this prison, do not run away, bow down in worship, and draw near. I've been sensing this tension that happens when something becomes uncomfortable and I want to run away or push it away. And when I can take that breath and remember I am the presence of the divine, then I can ask a new question, and that new question is what am I being invited to make welcome here? You see, if the opposite is showing up, then I'm being invited. If chaos is reigning, then I'm being invited to make peace welcome. If it appears there's lack and limitation, then I am being invited to recognize the abundance of my world, as somebody once sang. Right? If there's something missing, appears to be missing, it is simply an invitation to allow that greater something to do. So this realization of the divine, as we recognize that there's one life, that life is our life, then there is a proclamation of who we are. Where we differ in our prayer from many others is we speak affirmative prayer. We don't say, please God, give me what I want. We go, I already got it. I am it. And I'm calling that forth, allowing it to be realized. You see, we start with the whole and realize that everything within it is part of that. And so it is not that we are magically doing something. It's simply revealing the divine. Ernest Holmes once said, there is nothing to be healed. There is but a truth to be revealed. Right? Not that we're going to go about healing. We're about revealing the truth, and revealing the truth allows a new condition to come forward. I always have this image of Jesus walking through the crowds, and all kinds of, you hear there's a faith healer in town, and he's got it going on, all of a sudden crowds start showing up, right? They're all like, I want some of that, and I want some of that. So you can imagine as he was walking through, and what my sense, what I believe, what I've come to understand is that Jesus wasn't walking through the crowd seeing broken people. Jesus wasn't walking through the crowd seeing sickness. Jesus was seeing that divine essence and calling it forth. He was revealing the light within them. He was revealing the truth of who they are. And consequently, things happened. People walked. People were healed. People were blessed. The work that we do, I believe in this teaching, is that we continue to deepen in that awareness that all is well. That God is all there is. and that we can engage in a different conversation. When people want to stress out about the price of gas, love them, but don't join them. Or whatever other condition it may be, right? It's to walk that path of clarity and conviction, knowing that all is well. This is why it takes spiritual practice. Daily, moment by moment practice to remember the truth of who we are. So what I would tell you, as Guy Finley says, first it may be difficult to imagine such an idea, that already within us dwells all that may ever be. This is it, kids. And yet so much more can be revealed, can it not? The acorn doesn't have to become something else to become the oak tree. The acorn has to become itself. The caterpillar doesn't have to become something else. It becomes a butterfly by revealing that. You see what I'm saying? It's already there. Now, you may go through a little chrysalis stage. Don't panic. It's all part of the process. And you must allow that to happen. I came across, I just want to mention, reading Fillmore's book, Teach Us to Pray, and there's this great 6-day exercise. So I copied it. There's some copies out there in the lobby. It's a wonderful 6-day affirmation of denial. And of course, it's language in his time, but it's still pretty good stuff. So that's helpful to you, just to walk you through a process. And what I love about Fillmore is he's always coming back to the spiritual quality behind the thing. You see, we're not seeking money. We're seeking abundance. We're not seeking the outer. We're seeking what we believe that experience will be if we had the thing. So behind everything that we desire, there's an experience that we're seeking. And when we realize that if I'm seeking peace, I know where to go for that. If I'm seeking joy, I know where to go for that. Within the secret chamber of my heart. So I invite you, as you move through this week, to hold in your heart and in your mind this very simple idea. I dwell in possibility. I realize the divine. Something comes up. I dwell in possibility. I realize the divine. Let's start that process together as we pray. Just breathing into the awareness, the presence, the power. What would that mean if it were true that there is one life that delights in its self-expression? What would it mean if that one life was our life right here and right now? What would it mean if I gently and lovingly released my self-imposed limitations to be the presence through which the divine can make itself known in the world? What it means is I would remember who I am. That I would live from a place of humble power. Not I, but the power within me that does the work. And so we call forth divine love, knowing that it heals and transforms all relationships. We fully and freely forgive those who we perceive have harmed us, and we allow ourselves to be set free. We forgive ourselves for our limiting ideas, our limiting behaviors, our worn-out beliefs. We lovingly release those that we might embody the fullness of who we are. We accept and know that wholeness is the divine reality, and that wholeness expresses itself as health and as well-being and as vitality through every cell and every system of all the levels: spiritual, emotional, mental, physical. Healing and vitality is our divine birthright. We speak the word of truth as we know that right here and right now we are abundant beings, that we participate in a divine flow, and so we joyously give and graciously receive of this bounty. As Rumi says, if we would have light, we must be open to receive light. And so we are open and receptive to all of our greater good. We allow ourselves to live fully, powerfully in this world, with the recognition of who we are, allowing our light to shine bright. We give thanks for the many blessings in our life right now, right here. We allow ourselves to be healed and transformed in this moment. As we move forward, we bless all that we see. We bless this spiritual community, knowing that it is divinely guided, that it is unfolding in perfect timing and in divine right order. We allow that love to extend from this place to be a balm to our world. We bless our brothers and sisters around the planet. We hold a high vision for a planet at peace and for a world that works for all. We bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, and teachers of all faiths, for we honor and celebrate the many pathways to the divine. How good it is to be the truth. And so as we give thanks for all of these blessings, we know it's already established. And so we know there's nothing more to do but to release into those divine laws. Know that through the power of the living Christ, all things are made new. To be grateful and thankful. And so in a sense, with a profound sense of joy and gratitude, I simply release this word knowing that it is so. As together we say, and so it is. Amen.